Topics to two of the top budget negotiators in the Senate, Chair of the Budget Committee, Democratic Senator Kent Conrad of North Dakota, and member of the Finance Committee, Republican Senator Tom Coburn of Oklahoma, both members of the so-called Gang of Six, the bipartisan group of senators who for the past 4 months have been working to forge a debt reduction compromise. Senators, welcome to both of you and happy Easter. Senator Conrad, let me start with you. There's a lot going on in terms of trying to deal with the budget. You got the Ryan plan, you got the president's plan, you've got another commission, and this so-called Gang of Six. Bottom line it here, do you have a deal? Are you going to be announcing something soon?
You know, we've agreed not to discuss the status of our negotiations, but if we don't have an agreement soon, we won't be relevant to this discussion.
So you're going to be relevant? You intend to be relevant?
We intend to be relevant, and I say this. We have made enormous progress in this group, and it is the only bipartisan effort that is underway, and at the end of the day, it has to be bipartisan or nothing is going to happen.
But Senator Coburn, realistically here, without the shroud of secrecy, are you going to have a deal?
Well, the hope is that we'll have a deal. The country can't afford for us not to have an agreement.
Let me stick with you on the point of contention, particularly with senators like you, Republicans, conservatives, and outside groups having to do with taxes. Could you support a deal here out of this Gang of Six on the budget that includes tax increases?
Well, we're not talking about it. I think if you go back and look at the Commission's report, what we were talking about is getting significant dynamic effects by taking away tax credits, lowering the tax rate, and having an economic increase that will actually increase the revenues to the federal government. We're not talking about raising tax rates at all.
All right, but
if there's a net effect of tax revenue, that would be fine with me. I experienced that during Reagan's period in 1986.
But if people's taxes go up in some way, it would appear to be a violation of the pledge that you signed with a well-known Americans for Tax Reform, Taxpayer Protection Pledge. This is the group you signed the pledge with. And the second piece of this is that you vowed to oppose any net reduction or elimination of deductions and credits unless matched dollar for dollar by further reducing tax rates. If taxes end up going up in some capacity, would you not be in violation of that pledge?
Well, I think which pledge is most important, David, is the pledge to uphold your oath to the Constitution of the United States, or a pledge from a special interest group who claims to speak for all of American conservatives when in fact they really don't. The fact is we have enormous, urgent problems in front of us that have to be addressed, and they have to be addressed in a way that will get 60 votes in the Senate, a majority vote in the House, and something that the President will sign. And that's our problem with where we are today. The President doesn't have a plan that'll get 60 votes in the House. The House doesn't have a plan that'll get 60 votes. And what Senator Conrad, myself, and other colleagues are trying to do is, where's the compromise that will save our country?
Here's the question.
This isn't about politics as normal. It's about making the decisions now that are urgent. When S&P decides that the trend is negative, and in fact sends a warning shot across our bow, I think there's not anything more significant we can do than come to an agreement.
Senator Conrad, let me ask you about taxes, because if I'm going to press conservatives on the idea of any tax increases, the press for Democrats is to say, hey, wait a minute, if you really want to tackle the deficit situation, how do you not raise taxes on the middle class, those making less than $250,000? Can't just do it on the rich. Alan Greenspan was on this program last week. He said the Bush-era tax cuts should expire for everybody. Is that not fair?
You know, let me just say this. Revenue has to be part of this, because revenue as a share of our national income is the lowest it has been in 60 years. Spending as a share of our national income is the highest it has been in 60 years. So you got to work both sides of the equation. But we did not raise tax rates as this proposal. What we did was have tax reform. Let me just give you an example. In the Cayman Islands, there's a little building, 5-story building, called Udley House. It claims to be the home of 18,000 companies. They all say they're doing business in that little building. The only business they're doing is monkey business. They're avoiding paying the taxes that they owe. If you reform the tax code and collect that money, I don't consider that a tax increase.
Fair enough, fair enough. But my question had to do with taxes on the middle class. The President's position is, I'm going to tax the millionaires, I'm going to tax the rich, but not anybody making less than $250,000. How is that sustainable if you really want to tackle the deficit? You look at these numbers. Don't taxes have to be raised on the middle class as well?
You know, I really don't believe they do. I believe the tax reform that the Commission called for, that produces additional revenue through going after these offshore tax havens. Let me give you another example. In recent history, the United States has seen the spectacle of companies, U.S. companies, buying European sewer systems. Not because they're in the sewer business, but because they want to write those investments off on their books for tax purposes. That kind of tax scam should be closed down. I don't consider that a tax increase, but it does raise additional revenue that can be used both to lower rates to make America more competitive and to reduce our deficit, because Tom Coburn is exactly right. Our country is headed for a fiscal cliff. A gross debt, 100% of the gross domestic product of the United States, not in the future, but this year.
All right, but I want to stick to this point. Senator Coburn, let me ask you. A lot is made of your personal friendship with President Obama, but you've also taken him to task for not leading on this issue. Is part of that failure to lead, in your opinion, that he will not be honest with the American people about the need for tax increases, if it's going to come to that, for those, not just the wealthiest Americans, but those making less than $250,000, if you really want to deal with putting revenue and spending in balance?
No, my argument with him is when he says 88% of the budget we're not going to touch, reform, or fix, and we're still going to solve our problems, is an absolute falsehood. The fact is you can't have Medicare out of the equation, you can't have Medicaid out of the equation, and we can't borrow the money, the $2.6 trillion that we've stolen from Social Security in the international financial market, without making Social Security sustainable.
Let me get on that point.
Let me finish my point, David. To lead on this issue and to create a false predicate that says we can solve our problems without addressing our entitlements, it hurts the country. It doesn't help the country, it hurts the country. So we ought to be honest with the American people. Medicare cannot continue the way it is if we're going to survive. Medicaid cannot continue the way it is if we're going to survive. To put those off limits is erroneous, wrong, and hurtful.
Here's the difficulty, and you both know it, Senator Conrad, is that the American people want more government than they're willing to pay for. Look at this poll, Washington Post, ABC News, from this month, about the popularity of taking certain steps that you just outlined, Senator Coburn. Cut Medicare spending, 78% oppose. Cut Medicaid, 69% oppose. Cut military spending, 56% oppose. The only thing that's popular is raising taxes on those making more than $250,000. So, look, you have members of Congress, Republicans and Democrats, who need to go out there and campaign. What makes you think they're going to take the tough steps that the president's not willing to take in terms of really dealing with entitlements?
Because we must. Look, we've just had the definitive study done by two of the most distinguished economists in the country, who tell us that once you reach a debt that is over a gross debt more than 90% of your national income, your future economic prospects are dramatically reduced. Future economic growth, future job creation, that's where we are as a country. This is a defining moment. And we've got to decide as a nation, are we going to do some things that all of us would prefer not to have to do, or do we wait for the roof to cave in? I think the American people are plenty smart. If you ask them the question, do you want to cut Social Security? Of course they don't. But do you want to make Social Security solvent for the next 75 years? Yes, they do. When you ask them the question, do you want to raise taxes? No, they don't. Yeah. But will they support tax reform to get additional revenue to reduce the deficit and make the nation more competitive? I think then the answer is yes.
Just a couple minutes left. I want to get both of you on this debate over the debt ceiling. Senator Conrad, you voted against raising the debt ceiling last time it came up. You said you don't regret the vote. But to hear Secretary Geithner say that's catastrophic. That's playing chicken with America's economy.
No, what I've done is I have been very clear for the last 10 increases in the debt. I will not support any long-term extension of the debt without a plan or a proposal or a process in place to deal with the debt. And so I've voted for short-term extensions, but I won't vote for a long-term extension, and I won't do it now unless we have a plan to deal with this debt, because at the end of the day, this represents a fundamental threat to the economic security of the United States.
Well, you're a Democrat saying that, so unless there's direct linkage between spending cuts and raising the debt limit, you won't vote for increasing it here.
No, those are not my words. My words are very clear, and they have been for years. I will not vote for any long-term extension of the debt, more than a year, unless there is a plan and process.
And this vote would be less than that?
I don't know. We don't know what the plan is. I think there are many who are saying this will be longer than that. Look, I think it is critically important that we get a plan in place to get this debt under control. I will vote for short-term extensions. I think it would be catastrophic to renege on our debt, but we got to have a long-term plan to deal with it.
Senator Coburn, if you look at the polling on this, Americans, if you ask them, do not support raising the debt limit at this particular time. Do you think, are you confident that there'll be any linkage between spending cuts and a vote to increase the debt ceiling?
Well, the only way we solve our very real problems is to start getting our spending under control. A debt limit doesn't really mean anything because we've always extended it. And the Treasury Secretary has the ability, even if this debt limit is not extended, he has the ability to continue to pay interest on our bonds. The idea that we might say that this is catastrophic is wrong. That what is catastrophic is continue to spend money that we don't have on things we don't absolutely need and continue to mortgage our future and not fix the very real problems that are in front of us.
Senator Coburn, before we go, I want to ask you a political question. As I asked Senator McCain, you have been critical of Newt Gingrich because of multiple marriages, saying you said in the past that he doesn't have the commitment to marriage to be a good presidential candidate or indeed to be president. Do you think that Donald Trump will face similar difficulties, having been married several times with conservatives?
Well, you know, not to comment on either of them, I think what our country's looking for is courageous moral leadership. At this time of multiple problems that face us, we need somebody who has demonstrated sacrificial leadership, that has demonstrated consistency and an ability to lead based on a life that's modeled on what American ideals are. So that's not to comment on either of them, other than the fact that the way we get out of the problems is people being honest with us about our situation and the problems that are in front of us and what the potential solutions are.
You have been a friend and a colleague of Senator John Ensign, who has resigned. Speaking of morals, his extramarital affair and other questions came before the Ethics Committee, and he has decided to resign. You have been a mediator in some of that process. Do you regret the role that you've played on any of these sides with regard to Senator Ensign?
No, I just regret that the moral mistakes were made and the consequences are severe associated with those. And with that, I wouldn't have any other comment.
Was it appropriate for him to resign?
Like I said, I don't have I don't know the basis under which he resigned, and I'm not privy to that. So that's a decision he made. And what he stated was best for his family.
Senator Conrad, do you think it's appropriate to have the Ethics Committee now make public its findings?
You know, that's for the Ethics Committee to decide. I used to serve on the Ethics Committee. I think it's would be appropriate for them to make a final report. That's certainly provided for in the Ethics Committee rules.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Senators, thank you both very much for being here. Coming up, tough choices on taxes, spending, and entitlement reform. Will Washington bridge the partisan divide and find room for compromise? Plus, high unemployment and soaring gas prices